I was having y'all your boy Rico from Street Scores, and again, I know it's late, but I had to work on so many other videos, and I even started working on some of the videos that I'm coming out with tomorrow, as in Wednesday. It's 11:27 Eastern Time. PM right now, so like it's gonna be confusing when I say things like today, tomorrow, yesterday, things like that. But the videos I'm putting out Wednesday I already started working on, and plus I know there's a set few people out there that actually enjoy these later uploads. So hey man, if that's the wave, camp highlights in the morning, a different video in the middle of the day, and then the training camp breakdown of what happened during the day / day before at somewhere around midnight. Cool. But today was day 16 of training camp, and a lot went down. First of all, there were a lot of really strong words from Rivera and Turner, but most notably Antonio Gibson getting work with the second, third, and special teams, along with the first teams a little bit, but we got to dive into that. I mean, this man was out here doing punt blocking. Then Jamin Davis looks like he might be ready. He looks like a guy that could probably really contribute this season at linebacker. I'm not sure if he's exactly the answer yet, but he looked way better in practice. And he even had moments in that preseason game against the Panthers that we should be really excited about. And then also, of course, another day of Curtis Samuel, full pads, full participant in a row. I mean, other than the Sunday that everybody had off because it was the day after a game, if you include the Saturday preseason game, Monday, Tuesday, and he may have actually practiced Friday in full or Thursday. Either way, he's been putting together a good amount of consecutive days of being a full participant and not going to the side field. So it's less ramping down, and ever since he's been ramped up, he stayed up. Also, Terry McLaurin doing goated things, and most notably, talking big trash. Gotta dive into that. And then, of course, there's a lot of other stuff to talk about, but y'all know how Rico of Street Scores does with these training camp breakdowns. We got to start with the injuries, give all the injury updates, good or bad. Then we got to talk about every position group, good or bad, anything that was notable. So we got to start with the quarterbacks, work our way all the way down to the offensive line, and then we move on to the defensive line, work our way all the way down to the DBs, and then we go to special teams. Then we go to anything random and interesting, including a lot of press conference, important quotes, all kinds of stuff, and anything that just happened around the team that I feel like needs to be reported. And I apologize for the long intro, but before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, y'all already know the deal, man. Make sure y'all pull up every Friday for the broadcast podcast where we talk about everything funny going on, whether it's sports, music, rap, anime, or whatever. And you can pull up in the chat and ask us any questions that you may want us to discuss. And then also make sure you pull up every Sunday for the call-in live show at 6 p.m. where y'all call in and you voice whatever opinions you may have, good or bad, about the team, and ask whatever question you may have for me. And without further ado, let's get it. All right, so starting with injuries, and mostly it's some offensive line injuries, because Charles Leno is back practicing again. He came back yesterday, as in Monday, and he was practicing again as in Tuesday, so that's really good to hear. Charles Leno was back practicing today, as in Tuesday, day 16, August 16th, because he had a Veterans Day off yesterday. And Andrew Norwell had a Veterans Day off yesterday, but he did not return today. But I don't think it's anything significant. And then Saahdiq Charles, because of all of that, was able to start at left guard in Andrew Norwell's place. But also really notable is that Chase Roulier was the starting center in team drills today. He didn't play in the preseason game against the Panthers, but he should end up playing a limited amount of time in this upcoming preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs, but we'll talk about that later in the Rivera press conference part of this video towards the end. Also, don't forget that Cornelius Lucas is finally back from his non-football illness. He started participating in team drills Monday. It was his first time in training camp that we've seen him do anything significant, and he continued to practice today. But also, offensive tackle Aking Bulu apparently walked off from practice with an upper body injury. I haven't heard anybody talk about it. I didn't even hear anybody ask Rivera about it in the press conference, but hopefully it's nothing serious. Also, Trey Turner still out with his quad injury, so we're already thin at guard because Saahdiq Charles is starting at left guard for you, which means Wes Schweitzer is starting at right guard still, with again Andrew Norwell out, Trey Turner out with his quad. But then at some point Wes Schweitzer got hurt and had to go to the medical tent, and then he didn't return. And Rivera, we'll talk about this again in the press conference part, but he did say that he's, quote, a little bit concerned, unquote, about Wes Schweitzer. Rivera said that he did land on his hip and we sent him in to shower up and get some treatment. So we'll see. Hopefully there's an update tomorrow. Hopefully it's like nothing happened and he's able to fully participate in practice, but we'll see. And now that we're receiving so many injuries to guard, I don't know which positional group is down the worst health-wise. Is it tight end or guard? It's between the two. Granted, we have a lot of young guys ready to step up at both positions, but of course you prefer to have your starters. Now moving on to quarterback, overall it was like an up and down day. Started well, then he had like a slight rough period in the middle, and then he ended very well. But we're going to talk about it. Early into practice, he had a really beautiful dime to Jahan Dotson over his head past the defense on the right sideline. And Dotson was able to go up, make the grab, and somehow get 2 feet down. And of course, everybody went crazy. William Jackson III had really good coverage on the play. It was just a better throw and a better catch. Good quarterback to good receiver is always going to beat good corner no matter what. The corner has to outplay those two to even neutralize them, let alone win. That's just the way that the NFL is built. But then, shortly after that, Carson Wentz finally threw his first interception in at least a week and a half, and then this is his first interception with full pads on throughout the whole training camp. All of his interceptions that he's thrown so far have been in non-full pad practices. And it was William Jackson in the coverage there as well. It was a pass attempt for Terry McLaurin. William Jackson just had really good coverage, and this was just part of a streak of really good plays by the defense. The whole 11 of them. Defensive line, linebackers, DBs, all of them. And just to break down how impressive this play was, it was a pass down the right sideline, and the pass was a little bit behind Terry McLaurin, but William Jackson III did a really good job of breaking on the comeback route that Terry McLaurin was throwing and then boxing Terry McLaurin out. It was a really good read. It was a really good play physically as well. It was just one of those elite corner plays. If we can get that out of him consistently against everybody in the NFL, you could classify him as a shutdown corner. It was one of them type of plays. One-on-one with Terry McLaurin and completely shut him down and got the interception. And that interception, of course, is more on Carson Wentz than anything else, but it was also a really good play by William Jackson. The throw wasn't even that bad. William Jackson just had one of those plays where I guess he was in game breaker mode from NFL Street 2. I don't know what that was. And so then after going 0 of 3 during a period and then throwing that interception to William Jackson, while the 2s and the 3s went into practice, Carson Wentz went over to all of the receivers and they talked it out for a few minutes. And then from there on out, they had a really good practice. And I think that's really noteworthy. The fact that they pretty much had a heart-to-heart on the sideline while all of the other people were practicing. Carson Wentz went to the receivers and was like, we got to figure this out type of thing. And they figured it out. Because after that, he was able to hit McLaurin down the sideline, deep down the field eventually. A little later in practice, he threw it to where only Terry could get it. And I love the fact it was one of those throws where it's like he trusted his receiver. There was a lot of chemistry in that throw. That was a throw that Carson Wentz could not make to Terry McLaurin 2 weeks ago. Literally couldn't, to save his life. And so I love the fact that Carson Wentz starting to gain a little bit more confidence and especially chemistry with our #1 receiver in Terry McLaurin. And then in red zone drills, soon afterwards, on the first series of it, he threw one outside of the end zone, probably to avoid throwing a turnover, which again, that's a positive for what we've seen from Carson Wentz throughout his NFL career so far, forcing things. The fact that he'll take the layup like we saw in the preseason game against the Panthers, or like this play, for example, where he just nothing was there, throw it out of bounds. Don't force it and throw an interception and make a bad play worse. And then afterwards, he had a completion to Curtis Samuel, and then he had a touchdown to Jahan Dotson. So I love that. I like the fact, of course you want your quarterback to be perfect, but I also love the fact that he was able to not be perfect for like one smooth series, for like a few throws, and then he got with the receivers. They talked about whatever. I don't exactly know what he said. Maybe they had some of that Bugs Bunny water from Space Jam. But either way, they figured it out and they got it together. And that's also very encouraging. To see them have their lows and get out of the funk, that's almost better than being perfect all day, honestly. Because there's going to be lows and we got to see how you bounce back more than how good you look when you're on a streak. And so I love the fact that we're getting bits of both. Because he's going to have his off days. Again, the most important thing is to see how he bounces back. And it wasn't even like he had an off day and then waited to bounce back till the next day. He had a good start to practice, had an off period, and then he bounced back and killed it for the rest of practice. Now the running backs, which is probably why most of y'all are here. Really interesting story. I'm gonna try to go in somewhat chronological order. Well, to start off, first team reps of 7-on-7s, Brian Robinson's your running back. First teams, the starters, everything, when they start in 7-on-7s, he's your guy. And in that same period, Antonio Gibson was out there with the third stringers with Sam Howell. In 2-minute drill, he was with the backups, while JD McKissic was running with the ones, and then Brian Robinson was getting a mix of second string. But at some point, Antonio Gibson worked with the first stringers a little bit, and ultimately, it was kind of like a blend of everybody, JD McKissic, Antonio Gibson, and Brian Robinson, all working with the first, second, and third teams at different portions of practice. But it was still really interesting because this is probably like the first practice that we've seen Antonio Gibson work with the second stringers, let alone the third stringers, for extended periods of time. Granted, it was kind of almost an even split, even though I would say Antonio Gibson worked with the backups more than he worked with the ones, and then JD McKissic and Brian Robinson worked with the ones more than they worked with the backups, but it was still almost kind of even. It's not as dramatic of a difference as it was like yesterday, as in Monday, August 15th, where Antonio Gibson got like no runs with the ones. So it's not as bad as people think it may be right now, but it's basically like Brian Robinson didn't necessarily pass Antonio Gibson in the depth chart yet, but they're basically dead on even. Right now, it's just a plain old simple, we just brought both of these guys in this year at the same time. Who's going to show us who's the better running back? Antonio Gibson was the first running back on the depth chart up until that fumble. Now you can argue it's about even. Again, I wouldn't say Brian Robinson is ahead of him yet, but it's really even. And then the part that really scared people, and I feel like this was more so Ron Rivera sending a message, and it's a mix of something else which we're going to get to, is that we saw Antonio Gibson for the first time maybe ever working with special teams. This was at least the first time he's done that this offseason. He was doing punt protection in the slot, and notably, he did a pretty good job. His first block was a good one, but Antonio Gibson on special teams is crazy. But special teams coordinator Nate Kaxer said that he likes his running backs in the slot because the role is similar to pass protection. So it's kind of like a blend of they're trying to teach Antonio Gibson to become a better pass protector by giving him more reps with the special teams, now that Brian Robinson's taken a lot of his reps in the first team along with JD McKissic. But I also think that this is a clear message that Ron Rivera is not playing with Antonio Gibson and is showing them, hey man, you keep messing up, you're going to end up being a special teams third string type of guy. Granted, Antonio Gibson has always needed to work on his pass blocking, but it's not a coincidence that after he fumbled and after Brian Robinson looked so good after benching Antonio Gibson after he fumbled, that Antonio Gibson is starting to work with the special teams for the first time this entire offseason. And then just in chronological order, again, later on, Antonio Gibson was working with the third team after doing the special team stuff in 2-minute drills and all of that. And then he was back working with the first team shortly after that. And then during the first batch of first team drills, you had all three guys working in there at some point. And then during the last series of the day, Antonio Gibson was back with the ones. But it was a really mixed day of Antonio Gibson was out there practicing with everybody. Wentz, Taylor Heineke, and Sam Howell, and even special teams. Granted, again, JD McKissic and Brian Robinson were doing a lot of the same things, but they've always been doing that. They've always been working with the first, second, and third teams, and Brian Robinson's always been working with special teams. But after Antonio Gibson's fumble, now he's basically doing the same exact things Brian Robinson has been doing in practice. Antonio Gibson normally just only works with the ones for the vast majority of the time, and then other than that, he's chilling. So it's definitely really notable. It's not as panic worthy as a lot of fans may think it is, but it's definitely something serious, and it's definitely a strong message from Ron Rivera. Now moving on to the receivers, again, like I talked about earlier, Curtis Samuel in full pads for a consecutive practice is really good news. No ramp down recently at all. He's been pretty much a full participant in practices and including that preseason game for almost a week now. And then he also had a really good contested catch against, I believe, Benjamin St-Juste at some point in practice as well, which is the highlight that was going around. And I also included in my camp highlights video that I put out earlier today, as in Tuesday. And then like I spoke about earlier, Samuels was one of the recipients of a good pass from Carson Wentz towards the end of practice where they ended really strong. And then the next one went to Jahan Dotson for a touchdown, like I said. And up until towards the end of practice, Jahan Dotson was kind of having like a quiet day, but then he caught that touchdown from Carson Wentz and then was able to get a touchdown as well from Taylor Heinicke shortly afterwards. And that one was like a really nice sliding grab that wasn't a really accurate pass that he had to go and adjust to make. And then, like I said earlier, to start practice, he had that really good pass thrown to him down the sideline with William Jackson in good coverage against the sideline where he barely tapped his feet inbounds. But he was pretty quiet kind of in the middle, but so was Carson Wentz. And then Terry McLaurin doing Terry McLaurin things. He had a crazy boss over Kendall Fuller. And just like how in that preseason game where Carson Wentz underthrew Terry McLaurin when he was open, it was kind of the same thing this play where he basically underthrew Terry McLaurin by like 2 yards. Kendall Fuller was right there to make the play, and Terry McLaurin was like, nope, I need that. And like I said earlier, Terry McLaurin also had that really good catch from a beautiful throw from Carson Wentz down the sideline earlier in practice where it showed a lot of chemistry and things like that. But back to the Kendall Fuller play, it was crazy. Cameron Curl was in the area as well, and Terry McLaurin literally just took it. Not a good throw from Carson Wentz at all. But what I loved the most was how much trash he was talking afterwards. I mean, he was very animated talking to Kendall Fuller. I mean, straight up to his face talking to him. And the main point that he was yelling to Kendall Fuller about was that he was, quote, disrespecting the whole field, unquote. Basically, Terry McLaurin was saying that Kendall Fuller was cheating and only playing the short stuff. And so Terry McLaurin was like, hey man, if this man's playing underneath, I can easily beat him deep. And then he showed him that he could even with an underthrow. And so he was talking big trash because he was like, hey man, Carson Wentz, throw it up there. If this man is playing underneath on everything, I'm faster than him. And then the Kendall Fuller don't only play just underneath. I deserve the respect to be covered all throughout the field. Don't try to cheat like I can't just run right by you right now. I love it, man. I love to see some personality and aggressiveness out of Terry McLaurin because he's so well spoken in those interviews and press conferences. So I love to hear that side of him. And then tight end wise, of course, just with Sammis Reyes placed on IR, like I did a whole video breakdown on him and Troy Apke and the other 3 guys that got cut or put on injured reserve for us to get from 91 to 86 players on our roster, which was the deadline at 4 p.m. today, as in Tuesday. Now we're left literally, I mean, Sammis Reyes has been hurt for a couple of days, but we're literally only left with healthy tight ends of Armani Rogers, Curtis Hodges, and Eli Wolf. That's literally it. Those are our 3 tight ends in practice. So first, second, third stringers, those are our only 3 guys, and at times 2 of them are on the field. So they're getting plenty of opportunities to develop and show that they deserve to be on this roster. And then offensive lines wise, like I already said earlier, Charles Leno returned to practice after taking a veteran days off yesterday, but Andrew Norwell was not there today, so he took 2 days off, both Monday and Tuesday, as in today, August 16th, day 16 of practice. And also, like I mentioned earlier, Chase Roulier is starting at center, which is great news. And again, with Trey Turner still out with a quad injury and Andrew Norwell out a second day in a row because of Veterans Day, I guess. I don't know. I hope it's nothing serious. Saahdiq Charles was able to start at left guard, like I mentioned earlier, but Wes Schweitzer was starting at right guard until he got hurt. And so then Chris Paul stepped in and was just starting right guard for the remainder of practice. Very notable. And then at some point in practice as well, Chris Paul took some snaps at tackle. And Rivera already loves his positional flex, guys. Y'all know how much he loves that. And Chris Paul was already making noise at guard. And if he can contribute as a backup tackle as well, oh, he's one of the strongest roster locks on this team as a 7th round pick. Then defensive line, they just had a really good day today. I mean, granted, we have injuries on the offensive line, but they went out there and was constantly getting pressure on all of the quarterbacks. I mean, there was even one play where Casey Toohill was able to get pressure on Heinicke, and then Heinicke having to throw the pass under duress towards the back of the end zone, and Danny Johnson came with a one-handed leaping catch, which I'm pretty sure some of y'all may have already seen on Twitter or wherever. And then lastly, before we leave the defensive line, Chase Young was at the end of practice getting a little bit of extra work in. He was working with the sleds a little bit, and granted, he was moving very slowly, but it was good to see. The fact that he could at the very least get in the right formation and pose and technique and stuff, and to bend down and try to explode off of his leg again, it was slow, but at least it was something. Now moving on to the linebackers, before we get to Jamin Davis, David Mayo and Khaleke Hudson had a really good stop against Jonathan Williams in the run in the backfield where they just completely blew it up. And other than that, Jamin Davis, man, had probably his best day of probably being in the burgundy and gold uniform as far as practice practice goes especially. I mean, even at the end of practice, JD Mckissic said, quote, looks like a totally different player, unquote. And I trust JD Mckissic if anybody. I mean, he's a running back as explosive as he is, only being second to Alvin Kamara in receiving yards out of the entire NFL the past 2 years. I think he knows what he's talking about. And to say that he looks like a totally different player, I'm not surprised. And John Comm even talked about how impressed he was with Jamin Davis these past few days. And even like I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned in previous videos, Jamin Davis had some moments in that preseason game, especially against the run, that we never saw last year. So I'm very encouraged by him. But then what he did today in practice, again, as in Tuesday, August 16th, because I already know this video is probably going to upload by like very early Wednesday morning, so I try to tell y'all what day I'm talking about. But he had a really good 3 plays in a row. The 2 most notable plays were the second and third play. The second play, he covered McKissic so well one-on-one that Carson Wentz looked at it and was like, I can't throw it. I can't go there. That man Jamin Davis is not playing with us right now. And then the next play, he had a really good interception off of a tip pass from Carson Wentz to Dax Milne that got broken up. And now that interception was not Carson Wentz's fault. It hit Dax Milne. He should have caught it, but he got hit. It went up in the air, and Jamin Davis, right place, right time to make the play. And of course, the defense was super hype, and Jamin Davis was running with the ball and everything. I love it, man. I love the fact that he's making plays and is building his confidence. But most importantly, my biggest worry about him was not coverage, but it was in run support. He made a couple of those plays today in practice, and again, he had a really good one in that preseason game where he blew up the fullback, and that allowed Daniel Wise and I believe Jeremy Reeves to end up making the tackle. But it was completely Jamin Davis's fault as to why that play got blown up. That was completely him who made the play. The other 2 guys just made the tackle. And then we just need to see that out of him consistently. And then going to the DBs, like I mentioned earlier, William Jackson had a ridiculous play against Terry McLaurin where he just completely dominated that comeback route that Terry McLaurin was trying to run to get the interception against Carson Wentz. And then also Jeremy Reeves had a really good breakup on Curtis Hodges at some point today where Curtis Hodges went up there. I mean, he's 6'8". He went up there and he had it in his hands, looked like a really good contested catch, and then Jeremy Reeves was able to pry it away at some point. And then like I mentioned earlier, Taylor Heinicke under duress from Casey Toohill, and that's what pressure does. That's why we need our defensive line to be so great this year to help the secondary out. Danny Johnson had a pretty bad preseason game against the Panthers, even though the final rep that I remember him vividly taking, he made up for it with a really good pass breakup. Well, he didn't really make up for it. It was like 3 bad plays and 1 good play. But still, with DBs, you got to put the past in the past. You got to leave it there. If you had a bad day, the next day you need to erase your memory and keep on going like that bad day never happened. And it sounds like he did that today in practice with that ridiculous one-handed pick. Again, Casey Toohill with some pressure on Taylor Heinicke. Taylor Heinicke trying to heave it up there, and Danny Johnson, the one-handed interception was crazy. And then special teams wise, like I mentioned earlier, you had Antonio Gibson not only running with the 1s, 2s, and 3s throughout practice, which is pretty new for him, but he was also out there with the special teams as a punt blocker. And again, like I mentioned, Brian Robinson also worked with the 1s, 2s, and 3s. JD Mckissic worked with the 1s, 2s, and 3s. But one of the most significant things is that Brian Robinson has usually been the only guy doing that punt block stuff that Antonio Gibson did today. This was Antonio Gibson's first day doing it. That says something. And now for all of the really interesting quotes and press conference interviews and stuff like that. Well, before we get to that, Ron Rivera held a really long 5-minute passionate speech to the players after practice. Like, the players rarely just take a knee after practice in like a big circle like they did. And again, Ron Rivera was talking to them passionately for 5 minutes. And so when asked about it in the press conference, he didn't really give much detail on it. He said, quote, I struggled with some things that happened, unquote. But people there are basically saying that he didn't seem happy about how Sam Howell was taken to the ground during a drill at one point. And then there were also some other hits throughout practice that caused guys to get up slower than they normally do and things like that. And Rivera was livid about it. Again, a whole 5-minute speech about that specifically. But then going to his press conference, he did elaborate on Antonio Gibson and everything that's been going on. He said, quote, there's always been a competition on this team, unquote. But now, I mean, even though he hasn't necessarily admitted it out loud, there's a difference between this week and the previous weeks in training camp. there's a clear difference that the competition is way more narrow and a little bit more neck and neck than it's usually been. Also, Rivera said that he's not exactly sure how much the starters will play yet on Saturday against the Kansas City Chiefs at 4 p.m. We'll still see. And of course, I'm going to be live streaming during that game like I usually do. And he also mentioned Chase Roulier. He said he will start, but he'll be on pitch count. Not exactly sure how long he'll be out there as well. And again, just go ahead and embrace the fact as a fan that they're going to be overly cautious before anything else. So don't expect the starters to be out there extremely long like we'd hope. It would be nice for them to play a whole half, but I highly doubt it, especially with all of the injuries that we have. And then Scott Turner up next, he spoke about Antonio Gibson's fumbles. He said, quote, "You can't waste a possession. If you fumble the ball, that's a waste of a possession. The first job is to protect the ball. Is something that has to be fixed," unquote. And I completely agree. The running back's primary job is to protect the ball more than anything else. Getting yards is after that. And so Gibson has to get that down because all of that talent does not matter if he keeps fumbling. Scott Turner also talked about how Brian Robinson wasn't perfect in Saturday's preseason game against the Panthers, but he did compliment the fact that he runs very hard and he's able to produce positive gains no matter what's going on, and that is very noteworthy. Scott Turner also said, quote, "Camp has been going very well. Our guys have been getting better and better each day. Carson has been outstanding," unquote, when talking about Carson Wentz. He also said that Carson Wentz's comfort level is increasing every day and he loves how much Wentz appears to care about the job. He also said that going from last year to this year, the scheme will largely stay the same with Wentz as the new quarterback, but he did say there will be an emphasis on certain plays and route combinations that we couldn't attack last year with the lack of arm strength. Now we have that arm strength, so generally the same offense, but we're going to be able to open up the playbook a little bit more. Also, like I spoke about in the previous training camp breakdown with day 15, from Monday, Rivera talking about the fact that Scott Turner is going to be on the sideline calling plays instead of in the booth now. Scott Turner got a chance to expound upon it. He said, quote, "Being able to speak directly to the players is huge. Feel like you're more and more part of the game," unquote. And I agree, man. You could tell a lot of the time last year with how inconsistent his play calling was. He would have really good play calls, and then he would have like, what? Like, why would you do that? That didn't fit the flow of the game. So with him being on the sideline now, I think that's going to fix a lot of that. Scott Turner is a great scheme designer and play designer, I think, undoubtedly. His problem has been play calling and going within the flow of the game and calling the right plays in certain situations. I think him being on the sideline will definitely fix that a lot. Again, he started doing it for the first time against the Panthers in that preseason game, and he will continue to do it. He said that he's also been thinking about doing it since the start of the offseason. He feels like the communication can be more beneficial with the change, and I agree. There's a lot of emotional stuff, and you got to see the quarterback's face. You got to feel what the quarterback is feeling to truly know where to go with the game. It's not all just X's and O's. And then, of course, somebody's got to be up in the booth. So he says senior offensive assistant Jim Hostler is going to be the guy that's up in the booth. And, you know, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Scott Turner to truly know what's going on because he's still going to be on the sideline. And he's going to have a guy in the booth telling him what's going on. But to be able to see it is a little bit different. But he said that he's confident in the fact that he'll be able to just kind of tell with the defensive schemes and what's going on with the defense is giving them as far as looks go and coverages and things like that. Also, Scott Turner said, quote, "I'm really happy to have Curtis back. This is a guy that can do a lot of different things and put pressure on the defense," unquote. And he showed a lot of that yesterday's practice, Monday as in August 15th, where Curtis Samuel was getting handoffs out of the backfield. He was working out of the slot and catching passes as a receiver from the outside. I mean, he was everywhere in practice yesterday. He still had a good practice today as in Tuesday, August 16th. But the day before that, Monday, man, Curtis Samuel was everywhere, and it looked like the type of Curtis Samuel that we signed last offseason. And then lastly, before we get to the really random last couple of things, JD Mckissic was also at the podium and had a press conference. And really the most notable thing outside of the Jamin Davis comment I mentioned earlier was that he wants to be better. He wants to make people miss. And he said, quote, "Get freaky with the ball," unquote. And I love that, man. He sounds like a lot of my friends talking like that. So I really like that. And then two things to end the video. Jason Wright tweeted towards Kevin Durant about the Durant Center and how they're basically investing in a generation of leaders and things like that. And KD also retweeted back and said thank you for all you do to Jason Wright. If you wanted to go check out the post and see everything that's going down, you could definitely go to Jason Wright or KD's Twitter to see it. But I just thought that interaction was pretty interesting, especially with Jason Wright catching a little bit of heat this past week. So to see something positive come from one of the DMV's best athletes of all time to support him, that's also a big burgundy and gold fan, I think that's pretty cool. And then lastly, in very random news, probably very insignificant news as well. The Eagles did release cornerback Jimmy Moreland. Remember the People's Champ? You know, maybe we bring him back for a tryout. I highly doubt it, but I felt like that is something that should be brought up so that y'all are aware of it. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video, especially Antonio Gibson and Jamin Davis and Terry McLaurin trash talking. Also, please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors, whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Be on the lookout for a lot of content, even outside of just the daily content that I give y'all with the camp highlights and then the camp breakdowns that I've been doing later towards the night. Those middle of the day posts where I'm working on these Pro Football Focus grades for the offense and the defense and the special teams. And I got so much stuff coming out. I'm trying to work on some film sessions, so stay tuned, man. Catch y'all later. I'm out.